Happy Sunday, fighters. Happy Sunday. How are you guys doing on today? I'm trying to get this light. How are you guys doing on today? For those of you guys who are just now tuning in, make sure that you are dropping those purple hearts in honor of my mother. On Sunday night, we always drop those purple hearts in honor of Francine Neal. Who do we have on the line? Hi, sister. How are you? We have an amazing show set up for you guys. Can you hear me well? Can you hear me? I had to go live from my room. I'm out in Philadelphia for a conference, the Rocky Experience. It was so amazing. Can you guys hear me? Can you hear me well, Sheena? Murtis, how are you? Happy Sunday. How are you doing? Thank you for those purple hearts. Make sure you guys are dropping those purple hearts. We have an amazing guest coming on tonight to give us some education. Tonight, we're talking about multiple sclerosis. But as always, happy Sunday, sister. My sister's on the line. Valerie, thank you for those purple hearts. As always on Sunday, let me cut my music down because you guys know I need my vibe to get started. We have an amazing guest to give us some education on tonight about multiple sclerosis. Show guests in the stream and hear them talk. Okay, great. So I'm going to bring her on. But first, just like we do every week, I am going to play our motivational video because regardless of what it is that we are dealing with, I want you guys, or whatever it is we are talking about, I don't ever want you guys to forget that my whole purpose, my mission is to always get back to the hearts of humanity. We need to get back to the hearts of humans. It doesn't matter what it is that we are dealing with. If we do not get back to the hearts of humans, if we don't get back to the hearts of everybody that we encounter, we're doing all of this for nothing. So I like to play a motivational video every week, and I usually share my screen, but because I'm out of town, I still want you guys to hear what it is that my little guy, Matty JT Stopatnik, is talking about. He talks about getting back to the heart songs of the people, getting back to humanity. And before I found him, I was not able to articulate my message because every time I encounter somebody, they ask me, what are you selling? What are you marketing? What is your program? I just want to get back to the hearts of people. Hey, Sharonda, how are you? Like I said, I'm going to play our video, and then we're going to get our amazing guest on here, and then she's going to give us some education on tonight. So let me play this for you. And you guys drop those purple hearts and let me know if you can hear this. For our world. Can you guys hear it?
We need to stop. Just stop. Stop for a moment before anybody says or does anything that may hurt anyone else. We need to be silent. Just silent. Silent for a moment before we forever lose the blessing of songs that grow in our hearts. We need to notice. Just notice. Notice for a moment before the future slips away into ashes and dust of humility. Stop, be silent, and notice. In so many ways, we are the same. Our differences are unique treasures. We are a mosaic of gifts to nurture, to offer, to accept. We need to be Just be. Be for a moment, kind and gentle, innocent and trusting, like children and lambs, never judging or vengeful, like the judging and vengeful. And now let us pray, differently yet together, before there is no earth, no life, no chance for peace.
Okay, yeah. So I never, regardless of what it is, this camera is confusing me because you guys know you can see the camera is always opposite. So um I don't ever want us to forget that. Regardless of what we talk about on the silent fight, we have to get back to the hearts of humanity. We talk about various different topics on here. Um, we celebrate different things on here, but never, never forget that we're nothing without the people. This platform is to give people voices that don't have a voice. And so that's why I chose to call it the silent fight. And one thing that was near and dear to me, one of my nieces got diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And so ever since I found that out, I have been on a journey to find out more about that because I've heard of it before, but I've never actually did any research or even paid attention to what it was about. But now, like they say, nothing matters until it matters. Nothing matters until it's personal. So now it is personal. And so we need to dig deep into this thing and figure out as much about it as we can because it is affecting the lives of people that are very, very close to me. And if it's affecting the lives of someone that's close to me, I'm only assuming that it's affecting lives of others that we know that's probably battling this and that's afraid to say something about it. A lot of times when people get diagnosed with things, they're afraid to share. They don't really have an outlet or even a resource. So I'm not going to talk too much about it because I don't know anything about it, literally. So I'm going to bring our guest on here and I'm going to let her introduce herself. And then we're going to get right into this content so that we can learn tonight. Let me see. Show in the strength. I'm using my mobile app, guys. So I'm not at home. Hi.
Hi.
How
Hi, how
are
are you?
I'm amazing. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm so happy to be on your show and so excited to share more about multiple sclerosis.
Thank you. Thank you for agreeing to do the show for me. Like I said, my little niece was diagnosed with it and we don't have any information about it. And so it's very important for me for us to get this information. So I really appreciate you. I'm in a group where we get guests for our podcasts and our TV shows and stuff like that. And almost instantly when I put the post up, she agreed to do the show. Can you pronounce your name for me? I don't like messing up people's names.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm Dr. Puja Aggarwal.
Okay.
Um,
And what kind of doctor are you?
so I'm a board certified neurologist. So I'm a brain doctor and spinal cord and nerves. And then I'm also a neuroscientist. So I do research on the brain.
Okay. Okay. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us more about you, what it is that you do.
Okay, so I'm a neurologist. I've been in practice for 14 years. I currently live in Orlando, Florida. So I practice, I see multiple sclerosis patients and treat them on the inpatient or in the hospital. And I have seen multiple sclerosis patients, several hundreds, if not thousands. I don't have the exact numbers, but I've taken care of lots of different types of MS patients. And so I also do, like I said, research on the brain, but that's more Alzheimer's based. But then I'm also a certified executive coach. So I help coach female professionals with burnout working in corporate America to overcome people pleasing, perfectionism, and anxiety and overwhelm to live a more empowered life. So
Okay.
I do a lot of different things.
Okay. You wear many hats just like myself.
Yeah.
You got to do what you got to do, right?
Yeah.
I'm trying to look on my other phone so that I can see the comments as they come in. So can you tell us what multiple sclerosis is, first off?
Yeah. So multiple sclerosis is a disease or a syndrome where your body creates antibodies or These are antibodies are proteins that attack your own brain tissue. Okay, so you have nerves in your brain, and they have a covering around it called myelin. Myelin, if you think about it, is like a wire or a cord, a power cord. So the outside black part is like the myelin. The inside part, the wires, is like a nerve. So that outside,
Myelin, you said it's called
yeah, myelin. It's Myelin.
Myelin. I'm just taking notes here.
Yeah, no problem. So that
Okay.
myelin actually is attacked by your own antibodies that are formed in your own body. They attack that myelin covering around the nerves. So then you get inflammation. You have inflammation in that area in the brain. There are cells that come in. And then what happens is when you lose that myelin with the inflammation, because those antibodies attack that brain tissue, then you don't have that covering around your inner nerves that insulates impulses or electrical signals that are sent from your brain to other parts of your body. So let's say, for example, if you get, so the left side of your brain controls the right side of your body, and the right side of your brain controls the left side of your body, okay? Just in general, for general purposes. And then let's say if you get what we call a lesion, a multiple sclerosis lesion, that's had that inflammation there in the left side of the brain in a certain part, and it's affecting where it controls your right arm and right leg, then you're going to have difficulty with movement in your right arm and right leg because you're having inflammation in that part of the brain that controls that movement. And so it's inflammation around in the myelin that causes you that myelin to break down, and then you don't have those impulses. They don't conduct as well from the brain down to other parts of the spinal cord, other parts of the body.
Okay, so you said it's inflammation in the myelin.
Yep, in the myelin, the covering around the nerves and the nerves itself. But
that causes the brain to start to break down, you said?
It causes the myelin to break down, that protein that surrounds the nerves.
Okay.
And so what happens is you can have, some people have something called clinically isolated syndrome, where they just get one of these lesions in the brain. And when I say lesions, I'm talking about one spot on the brain that may have inflammation and breakdown of the myelin and some of the brain tissue. So something called clinically isolated syndrome is where somebody just has one lesion and then they don't have any more the rest of their life. Okay. And then the other thing is that some people can get clinically isolated syndrome, but then go on later on to develop multiple sclerosis and get more lesions in their brain. Okay. So what I'm actually saying, so clinically isolated syndrome is just one lesion in the brain, or it could be multiple sclerosis can actually affect your eyes too. It can affect your vision, the optic nerves. So you can actually lose your vision, or it can become blurry because that those antibodies are attacking that nerve tissue, the myelin in the eyes. So that can cause blurry vision. So there's clinically isolated syndrome, which is one lesion. And then if you develop more than that, then that's called multiple sclerosis.
Okay. And Shayna said, is it preventative?
No, unfortunately not. So the working theory behind why people get multiple sclerosis is that they may have had an infection with something called Epstein-Barr virus. So that's the virus that causes mono. Okay. So
Epstein, repeat that. What kind of virus?
It causes mono, like the kissing virus. Okay. So it's EBV, Epstein, EPSTEIN, Barr, BAR virus. BARR virus.
Okay.
And so the theory is that people who develop MS have had this infection with this Epstein-Barr virus, and then they later develop multiple sclerosis. But where it's not definitive that is causing that.
My sister said Kamani has never had that. So what if you never had the?
Well, you may have had it and not known. Sometimes people get like a slight case of mono and not know it. But not to say, like I said, this is a working theory, but that doesn't mean that that's the definitive cause in everybody.
Wait, before we go any further, what was a disclaimer we were supposed to say before we
I just want to say that this is for informational purposes only. This is not to tell you that, these treatments are good for you, and this is just for informational purposes. I'm not giving medical advice.
Okay. I meant to ask you that before we started. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
Okay, so you said sometimes mono can be there and it's just not detected.
Yes, people can get viruses and not know they've had them.
Okay. And so I looked up a few questions because, again, I don't know anything else about it. I don't know anything about it, but do you know what percentage of people have multiple sclerosis?
So it's not that common. I think that the it happens more in women in their 30s and 40s is when they're diagnosed. Having it younger, in that somebody being diagnosed in their teenage years is actually very rare. It's not as common. And so it's usually females in their 30s and 40s, and sometimes males also. But then also there's some people who are diagnosed later on in life, actually into their 60s and 70s. Again, very rare though. So the percentages, I mean, it's less than 1 to 2% of the population that have multiple sclerosis.
Okay. So less than 1 or 2% of the population.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very small number of people who actually get MS. And
Yes, but then when you think about the actual numbers, how many people are seeing, they go to neurologists. So they do see a lot of patients then because they go and seek out neurologists.
okay. And is there any way to, like, once MS, I don't know if this sounds crazy or not, but once MS, once you have it, is there any way for you to have it and not get the symptoms? Like it's dormant, but you actually have it. Is that possible? Just like
Um,
the mono?
Yeah, so in terms of multiple sclerosis, like I said, you need to have more than one lesion in the brain. There are certain criteria you need to meet to be diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. So some people are diagnosed with multiple sclerosis and then they don't develop lesions, or maybe they do initially for years and then later on in life they don't have any more lesions or any more what we call relapses. Relapses are recurrence of or new symptoms, new neurological symptoms, weakness, numbness, vision changes, things like that. So sometimes people can have a few relapses and then not have any more later on. But it really depends if they're seeking treatment. Are they on medication or are they not? Because that can really make a difference in terms of if they have any more relapses.
Okay. Sheena said, is it hereditary?
So there is a theory that that there is some genetic component, but it's not clearly defined. What exactly it is that causes that genetic component.
Okay. Val said Kamani is taking, I don't know how to say that, GL.
Clarithromycin or acetate. So Copaxone is the brand name. So I mean that medication in general is good. It doesn't have as many side effects except for when you inject it could have like a local reaction, some inflammation, some swelling in that area. And I think that one is not as often. I think that's weekly. But again, this is just informational purposes. I'm not saying, either way that you should or should not be on that.
Okay.
Or sorry, your daughter.
Okay. And there are different types of MS. Can you talk about like a few types, or what are the types?
Yeah, so there are a few different types. So the first one is what we call relapsing remitting, where people get relapses, they get new neurological symptoms, they may improve, and then those relapses can reoccur. Okay. And then the other one that people can have is something called primary progressive. It's where they just get a significant amount of relapses and they don't recover from that. So meaning they get a lot of neurological symptoms, they don't really recover from them. And so then that builds up with significant amount of disability. Like they have weakness, they can't move as much. So what happens in that is that the brain, those antibodies are really attacking the brain a lot in that type of MS, primary progressive. And then they accumulate disability over time. And then there aren't many medications that really work for primary progressive. Okay. So there's the first one I mentioned, relapsing remitting, that can then progress into something called secondary progressive. So people who have relapsing remitting, where they get neurological symptoms, they improve from that, can go into something called secondary progressive, where they develop disability over time, but it's much slower than primary progressive MS. And so with that MS, people can have symptoms get better and still be fully functional, but then later on in life get a lot more disability and not recover from relapses.
Okay. And so with the primary progressive, that would be more severe than the relapse and remitting?
Yes, correct.
Okay. And so I heard that, I have some more questions, but I heard what someone who actually has it, she was telling me that stress is a trigger.
So stress can trigger new neurological symptoms, like let's say you're not taking care of yourself, you're not sleeping, not eating well, and those types of things. Those can help. Those can trigger a new what we call relapse with new neurological symptoms. But it's not always the case. It's not like everybody who's stressed is going to always get a new relapse. It really depends on the person. And I want to mention not everybody's course is the same in MS. Each person is very different from the next person with MS.
Okay. And when you say a relapse, now is a relapse where it causes a new lesion, or is it just kind of aggravation to the one that you already have, if that makes sense?
So it's typically a new lesion. That is what they call a relapse. And so there could be something called so they call it an MS exacerbation, meaning a new lesion comes on. But then there's something that where people can have like a pseudo exacerbation, where like if they have an infection or something like that, then their old relapsing symptoms, like let's say if they've had a relapse in the past or exacerbation in the past, those symptoms can come out in the form of when somebody has infection, or even if they're stressed, that can happen.
So what is that for us that don't understand? Pseudo,
Yeah.
say it
So
again.
pseudo exacerbation means it's not truly a new MS lesion in the brain or spinal cord. It is old neurological symptoms or old relapse symptoms that are coming back and showing up in the context of infection or stress or something like that. So it's not actually a new lesion, it's just old symptoms that are coming out because there's stress, there's infection or something like that.
Okay. And then it said, can it happen in young people?
Yeah, it can happen in teenagers. It can happen. I've never really seen a case because I'm adult neurologist, so I haven't really seen a case of much younger than like I think a 15 or 16-year-old. So, but I think there are definitely some other pediatric neurologists that have seen that before, younger than that.
Okay. And so what would be the reason? I guess it would just be mono that a child would get it.
So for teenagers, mono is the working theory, and for everybody in general, that's the working theory. But again, we don't fully know the cause.
Okay. Do you guys have any more questions out there? We're talking about multiple sclerosis on tonight. So what are the typical symptoms of MS?
Okay, so it could be vision loss in one eye or blurry vision. It could be both eyes. Some people present with just vision loss in one eye or blurry vision. And then it could be you have a weakness on one in an arm or in a leg, or numbness, or like a pins and needles type of feeling. It could also be people have difficulty walking. Before they were active and walking fully and they're young, but then they start having difficulty walking. It could, for some people, be that they have, changes in terms of their eye movements, like they can't move their eyes fully to the left or right or up or down. So there's lots of different symptoms. For some people, it can actually be behavioral. There can be behavioral changes because that inflammation is going on in a part of the brain that controls behavior.
Okay, so like pins and needles, she said, Kashina was asking about the symptoms as well. So pins and needles, blindness in one eye, or
Or
both,
just vision, blurry vision.
blurry vision
Yeah.
in one eye or both, and then problems walking, you said.
That can
And
be it.
go ahead.
So it can be problems walking, or weakness in an arm or a leg, or both an arm and a leg on one side.
Okay. Okay, Kamani said, what would a simple cold be like for me as a patient?
So it depends. Some people who have MS can just get a cold and be fine. They may not get any old neurological symptoms that return. So it really depends on the person. Or some people who get a cold or get a virus can have their old neurological symptoms come back, or they could develop, some people, a new MS lesion, new demyelinating lesion. And when I say demyelinating, that's that myelin covering around the nerve. So when you lose that, it's called a demyelinating lesion, or that spot on the brain is called a demyelinating lesion. I do want to mention that these lesions can also occur in the spinal cord, not just the brain. So they can occur in all the cervical spine or thoracic spine, because there can be inflammation in the spinal cord too that causes multiple sclerosis.
So it doesn't have to be on the brain.
So if for a diagnosis of MS, there does have to be brain lesions, but then it can also affect the spinal cord.
Okay. So if it's not, if it's not on the brain, because you said it can affect the spinal cord, so would it not be diagnosed
It
as?
would, yeah. So it would be depending, like in the cervical spine or thoracic spine, which is like in the neck and like right in the upper back, it would be called something called transverse myelitis. And that would not be a diagnosis of MS then. That would be, so transverse, TRANSVERSE, and then myelitis, MELITIS.
Okay. But that wouldn't be considered multiple sclerosis?
No, you need to have meet certain diagnostic criteria. I'm not going to go into it because it's very detailed, but
Okay.
that would not be multiple sclerosis if it's just lesions in the spinal cord.
In the spinal cord, it would have to go up to the brain, but that would be the starting. It can.
Yes, it can present like that with transverse myelitis and then go into multiple sclerosis.
So once you're diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, would they check your spine? Would
Yeah.
that be?
Mm-hmm. So
That'll
that's a
be
part of follow-up. Seeing a neurologist is getting imaging of the brain, spinal cord, the cervical spine, and thoracic spine.
okay. Valerie says she has them there too, so she does have them on her spine as well. Okay. And does it, I'm sorry, because I'm reading my
No, it's
questions.
fine.
I want to make sure I ask the right questions. Does MS always cause paralysis?
Not always. That is something that could definitely happen, but it depends where that lesion is or spot in the brain is of inflammation. Wherever that spot on the brain is, symptoms will correlate to that part of the brain.
Okay. What? Okay, I'm trying to get these questions. I'm sorry. What are some foods that she can eat? What are some foods if you have multiple sclerosis you can eat?
So in general, just reading a healthy diet, whole grains, lean meats, fruits, vegetables, all of that can help reduce inflammation in general, and that can also help overall health. But that can there isn't definitive diet for multiple sclerosis. There is some theory that people who have food allergies are more inclined to also have multiple sclerosis. There's maybe some correlation, but that is not fully researched. So I just want to mention, so there's not any one specific thing that I could say that you should try to eat this to help.
Okay, is there anything to, so you're not saying to eat something to help, but is there anything that she should avoid, like that will actually trigger it?
I mean, so she's quite young, but I mean, I think when you're older, avoiding like alcohol and things like that, or that, because when you are stressed, you're drinking, you're not sleeping as well, that can trigger a relapse.
So like lack of sleep will trigger?
Lack of sleep can trigger it. I'm not to say with everybody it will, but it can definitely trigger it. A lot of stress, not taking care of yourself. Also making sure that you go to those appointments with the neurologist to follow up is very important, is that they'll image you. We'll do imaging typically once a year of the brain and spinal cord, but it really depends on the person.
Okay. And does Kamani asks, does keeping active help her symptoms?
Yes, so keeping active is one of the best things you can do for MS, because the thing is that if you're not using that part of the body, it's just going to become more weaker. So let's say if you get weakness in an arm from an MS lesion, then the best thing to do is try to keep on using that arm. Then that myelin can, the damage is there, but then you can still rebuild those pathways and still get back some of that strength. That's why people who have a relapse, they go to physical therapy and occupational therapy to help gain their strength back.
Okay. Okay. So the more active, the better, Kamani, is what
Yes,
I'm getting.
staying active is good.
Staying active is very good for you. Okay. Was there anything else? I have more questions, but was there anything else that you wanted to just add on, like as far as the educational portion? I don't want to
Yeah,
just keep on.
so
Go ahead.
no, yeah, so the MS has been associated or correlated with low vitamin D levels. So there is a higher incidence of MS at higher latitudes. So I mean, higher like in the north in the US and things like that, because they don't have as much sunlight either. So that so sunlight, if you get more sunlight, correlates with a higher vitamin D level. So, and then when you don't have as much sunlight, there is a lower vitamin D level. So that's just one thing I want to point out. So a lot of people who have MS will take vitamin D. And the other thing is that a heat can make your symptoms worse. So let's say if you go out in the heat, that's really hot, that can bring back or make your neurological symptoms or relapse symptoms worse.
Yeah, we found that out this summer, that the heat is not good for it.
Yeah, it's not.
The heat is not good for it. And so you said vitamin D.
Yes, vitamin D.
Vitamin D does vitamin D, does it help the symptoms or prevent a relapse, or like what is the significance of the vitamin D once you have the MS?
So the vitamin D is to bring up your vitamin D level to hopefully help you not have relapses. But there's no guarantee. You could still have a normal vitamin D level and you could still have a new relapse or new neurological symptoms.
Okay. Valerie says she takes vitamin D every day.
And so like keeping active, eating a healthy diet, all of that is very helpful and important for people with MS, and avoiding excessive heat, because that can make your symptoms worse.
Okay. So what about excessive cold?
So there are some people who that can happen where it's excessively cold, symptoms can get worse, but that's definitely not as common as the heat.
So the cold is probably better.
Yeah, than the heat.
Okay. And what about things like staying hydrated? Staying hydrated for us is obviously good, but is it better when you have does it help any with the muscles?
I mean, it just helps overall health. It's not specifically like the water is going to help, MS, but anything like staying healthy, active, helping your overall health helping your overall health will help benefit your MS.
Okay. And can it be cured?
So MS cannot be cured. It is something that once somebody is diagnosed, they have lifelong. There are treatments or medications that people can take. I think as mentioned before, Copaxone is one. There are pills, there are injections, and there are infusions that people can get. I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty of those because those are very in-depth, but there are several treatments. And if you have it, definitely speak to your neurologist about what's best for you.
Okay. And what about like during the time when she has her menstrual and stuff like that, does that affect the MS? Does that affect MS?
So for some people it can. So they actually say in certain people, pregnancy can be protective because then they don't have MS relapses. Again, there's the research behind this is still in the works. We don't have a definitive correlation, but people do say that pregnancy helps prevent certain people from having relapses. So getting your menstrual cycle in certain people can cause the symptoms to get worse, but again, it's not necessarily going to be a trigger of new symptoms. Possible, but again, each person's different.
Okay, so menstrual and pregnancy. Go, because Sheena was asking that. Is it safe to have children? Can you elaborate on that a little more? Because she is young and she has not had any children yet.
So yeah, I mean, I really recommend following along with your neurologist whenever that time period comes when she or whoever wants to have kids if they're young. Certain medications can be safe in pregnancy, and it's something that they would definitely need to speak with their neurologist about, because there are certain things that they can do if they're stable. Some people can come off medication for a time period of being pregnant because it is more protective. So it really depends upon the person and how their neurologist feels about it. So people lead normal lives with MS. I mean, they still have MS and some neurological symptoms, but still people have good quality of lives if they're on medication for MS and they're making sure they're taking care of themselves.
And so what about the baby? Is it passed on to the baby if the mom has MS?
Again, that's not something that is fully known. There is some genetic component, but I can't say definitively that one person who has MS, that their child's going to have it.
And so I want to talk a little bit about, because you do MS, you treat MS and you do research on the brain, but you have a mindfulness business. Can you talk a little bit about that and how it correlates with MS? And because like I said earlier on, we found out the person that I talked to, she was saying how stress can actually raise or trigger a relapse for MS. And so I noticed that you had the mindfulness. So can you talk a little bit about that? What you have going on with that?
Yeah, so one thing, so like I said, besides being a neurologist and researching the brain or being a neuroscientist, I coach on overwhelm and burnout. So mindfulness can help anybody, people who have MS or any medical condition, or even just anybody who doesn't have any medical conditions. Mindfulness is being present in the moment without judgment, having self-compassion, and just allowing your feelings without any judgment. And so one thing that we tend to do, and our brains naturally do, is we tend to judge ourselves, and we're very negative about ourselves. So, but when you learn mindfulness, again, that's not judging yourself, being present in the moment. And it takes time. It's not something that you develop overnight. It's a habit, it's a practice. You can reduce stress over time. And so I help my clients to help reduce their stress. What I use is a few different methods. So mindfulness is one. And for people to develop mindfulness, a few things I recommend is journaling. Journaling really helps your brain to de-stress.
Spell it
Journaling
for
your
me.
thoughts.
I can't really hear you. Spell it for me.
Just journaling, like having a
Oh,
journal.
journaling. Okay.
Journaling, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, having a journal. So that helps be more in tune with your thoughts and your feelings. That is really helpful to help reduce stress. The other thing is practicing gratitude. Saying things that you actually have and being thankful for that. Not only thinking about it, but saying it out loud and writing it down, because then your brain sees it on paper, and then when you're saying it out loud, your brain's hearing it. So gratitude has actually been shown to increase dopamine in your brain, norepinephrine, serotonin. These are all of our happy chemicals, which helps boost your mood and increase joy. So those are a couple things. And then the last thing to really help with mindfulness is meditation or breath work. Just taking 5 minutes to focus on yourself and your breathing, sitting in a quiet room, putting your hand on your heart and feeling your chest go up and down, taking deep breaths can really help reduce your stress. So those are just 3 things people can start today to help reduce their stress. And so that can help anybody in any situation.
And what is dopamine again?
So dopamine is a neurotransmitter. It's a chemical in your brain. So that is, they call it like the pleasure chemical. It helps make you happier. So that's one of the chemicals. And then there's something called norepinephrine. And then there's something called serotonin. Those are also chemicals in the brain that help boost your mood and make you happier.
Okay. So how long have you been doing that? The mindfulness group that you do?
Yeah, so I've been doing that for about a year and a half or so right now.
Okay. And would it be good for obviously, but I still want to ask you, would it be good for her to like join groups and stuff like that that deals with mindfulness? And what about yoga? I heard that that was like really, really uh peaceful.
Yeah,
Would
so sorry, go ahead.
would yoga be good for her having MS?
Yeah, so first of all, about the groups, any group, the support group for MS or anything like that is always going to be helpful. Okay, because you get to know other people who have it. And mindfulness on top of that would be great. So yoga can definitely be beneficial. It's a part of that staying active part. Yoga not only helps with your physical health, it helps with your emotional and mental health also. So it really helps to calm people, make them de-stress. So it can help overall.
Okay. And so what can be done about MS now? Like what can be done?
So unfortunately, right now, the only thing is what we call DMTs, disease modifying therapy. They're medications. Um,
DMTs?
yeah, so that's an acronym for disease modifying therapies, or DMTs is what people call it, our doctors. And so, like I mentioned earlier, the whole host of medications are pills, there's IV infusions, there's injections that people take. Those are things that help reduce, or the goal is to help reduce inflammation or those new lesions happening. But sometimes people can be on those DMTs or those medications and still develop new lesions, at which point they'd have to change to different DMT therapy. So,
Okay. So I heard so DMTs is what can be done about it now. So I was talking to someone and they said that because when they fly or they become too active, the person actually is in like severe pain. And so she said when she flies, she actually drinks caffeine. So she don't drink coffee, but she drinks soda with caffeine in it. Can you speak on that? She said it really helps her pain level, her triggers. Have you
I
heard
can't
that
speak to that.
before?
I've never heard of that before, being anything that people use with MS.
Okay. So what about CBD and THC? Do you
So,
hear
I mean,
people?
those can help. Those can help with the actual pain and things like that. But the studies on those, the actual research, there's, it's still the jury's out on that because marijuana is not legal on the federal level, those studies haven't really been done. But people do take CBD or marijuana to help with the pain, and they do find it beneficial.
Okay.
Other people I've seen will use like acupuncture, things like that to reduce stress and help, or other alternative therapies to help with their energy healing. Yes, caffeine, it's certain types of headache. Caffeine helps with certain types of headache, but it can make headaches worse also.
It can make it worse.
Caffeine can make headaches worse. I'm
Right.
not talking about MS. Yeah.
Right.
Too
See,
much
because
caffeine can make
I
it.
drink caffeine too when I'm having a migraine.
So, too much caffeine can actually cause migraines and headaches.
Okay.
Um,
And so I'm trying to look at the comments. I'm sorry. So why is early treatment important?
You're less likely to develop disability, meaning more lesions and more weakness or more numbness or things like that. You're less likely to accumulate more disability or have new lesions because when you're on treatment, again, you're modifying your immune system, which attacks the body or the brain tissue.
And once it is, so say you have a severe, I guess it will be a relapse. Once
Mm-hmm.
so say if you develop a disability from it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Is there any way that it can be reversed? Even though I know MS is not curable, can you with the physical therapy and because Kamani was dealing with a lot of stuff and now it seems like her hard work is reversing.
So
She's
you
getting
can definitely help build that strength back and things like that, but that lesion is going to be there in the brain. And anytime you image that lesion later on, that lesion will be present. But it depends. If it's an active lesion, meaning active inflammation going on, they give something called dye. It's a certain dye that they give with the MRI. It's called gadolinium. If it's an active lesion, meaning active inflammation in the brain, then that spot will light up with that dye on the MRI.
okay. And Latasha Johnson said high blood pressure triggers it as well. Can you talk about that?
So anything that's going to affect your health, blood pressure, stress, infection, anything like that uh, can trigger relapses.
Okay, so if someone has high blood pressure and they have MS, then how would they treat that? Because I know some people have high blood pressure and they have high blood pressure medicine. So would it be a different treatment or would they just combine it with the MS medicine?
So we as neurologists would not treat that blood pressure. That's something that is done by their primary care doctor. So they're two separate entities. There is a correlation in terms of one triggering, neurological symptoms in MS. But again, the blood pressure is not something that we as neurologists typically treat for MS. They are done by the PCP. They'll be two separate medications. There is no one medication for both.
But it would be okay to have that treatment.
Yeah, there's plenty of people who have MS who are on blood pressure medication and MS treatment.
Okay. Do you guys have any more questions? We're talking about multiple sclerosis on tonight. Valerie says she had that dye. It was another question I had. I totally got a blank right now. Um, but why is it difficult to diagnose? I was talking to my sister and she was saying that there are more children who have MS than are diagnosed because they are younger.
So again, I'm an adult neurologist, not a pediatric, but really the thing is that they may be misdiagnosed with something else, or they could think that those lesions, or they could not image the brain. When kids are younger, or they're teenagers or younger than that, people may not image the brain as much and may not find those lesions. They may attribute those symptoms to something else. But then also for an MS diagnosis, they typically get something besides an MRI of their brain. They do something called a spinal tap or a lumbar puncture. They're looking for a certain protein in the spinal fluid. And the spinal fluid is a fluid that cushions the brain and surrounds the spinal cord and cushions it. That protein is something called oligoclonal bands. They're looking for that protein when they do a spinal tap or lumbar puncture. They take out that spinal fluid, send it off for testing, and look for that protein. And they look for inflammation in that spinal fluid, which can happen in MS.
Okay, and when it comes to the spine, will it ever like affect the spine to the point where she can't walk, or like where it's excruciating pain in her spine, or is it something that she would just know there's inflammation in your spine, if that makes sense?
So people can develop lesions or these spots it's on the spinal cord. So not like the spinal column, but the actual spinal cord. So which is a collection of all the nerves that goes down into the arms and legs. So you can get people who have lesions in their cervical spine. The cervical spine is right below the brainstem, and people who have lesions there can get weakness in their arms and legs. That can happen. So there can be people who get a significant weakness because of those lesions. And so, it varies from person to person. Some people may have small amount of inflammation, other people may have more. So it depends upon the person.
Okay. And Kamani says, some of the feeling in my small nerves and my fingers are not back. Will they come back?
I can't answer that because every person's different.
You just got to work at it, Kamani.
Mm-hmm.
You got to work at it. And so what is, because I know they have the Multiple Sclerosis Society, but
Mm-hmm.
where do we find resources at? Where do we find?
The MS
Go ahead.
So MS Society is a great place, but then also you're a neurologist. I mean, whoever you're seeing, go find your local neurologist, or actually even better, there's MS specialists, people who just treat MS. They do they're neurologists, but then they do a fellowship, extra training in MS and immunology. Or immunology is the study of the immune system. So people who have done a fellowship in that, they are the best source of information. I don't really
immunology.
So immunologists, they're neurologists who have done extra training in MS. Finding one of those people, there are pediatric MS doctors who are people who do pediatrics residency, then they do a child neurology fellowship, and then they do an immunology fellowship. So they do pediatric MS. So they are really well trained in MS, pediatric MS.
Okay. And the neurologist will be able to give her more resources. And when I'm saying resources, I'm saying for things like, if like funding for help with doctor bills and medication and like therapy and stuff like that. We need to find resources for that. And can you point us in the direction for that, so that she don't have to like stress over getting money or support? Because
So I think really the doctor can really help with that, because they would know the local resources. Again, I don't know wherever they're located. It varies from state to state what resources they have and what support groups and things like that. I think really speaking to your neurologist is the best thing, because they can point you into the right direction.
Okay. And the Multiple Sclerosis Society, that's nationwide, or is
Yes, that's a very well-known organization that is national, that helps people with MS. They have a lot of resources on their website. I don't have the exact address right now, but if you just give me a second, I can look it up. So it's the National Multiple Sclerosis Society, and it's just nationalmssociety.org is their website. They have a whole host of information on there.
Okay, yeah, I pulled it up too. That's where I got some of my questions from. So the next question I wanted to ask you was, why is it difficult to diagnose? Did I ask you that already? Why is it?
You did, because we just talked about like how people may have minor symptoms, and it may be that they didn't get imaging of the brain or the spinal cord, or they didn't get the right imaging when they had those symptoms. Or it could be it could be a spot on the brain, but it's not definitively an MS lesion. So people can have spots on the brain from other conditions besides MS. It could be migraines, and some people it could be high blood pressure, or stroke can cause spots on the brain. So it just really depends. It's something that you have to meet a certain host of criteria to be diagnosed with MS. And it's a time diagnosis, meaning that you get one lesion. I don't know if you mentioned, like I mentioned before, you get one lesion, but then you have to have more than one lesion to be diagnosed with MS. And so it's something that you can take time to diagnose, to have more relapses to actually be diagnosed with MS.
So if you have one lesion, then that's not considered MS.
Not usually. That's called clinically isolated syndrome. That's something that people who get one lesion are more likely to develop MS, but it's not always the case.
Okay. So it has to be, well, obviously multiple. And as far as like any advice you can give to a child that's dealing with it because she's watching, like as far as mindfulness, other than things that you said, like how, what am I trying to say? Like for her to go on with her everyday life, with going to school and everything like that, how does she get to a point where she's comfortable and she answers these questions for her friends? Because it's a lot being a teenager, right? Like what advice would you give for that with the mindfulness groups, or how does she approach that in your opinion? Because
So
I
I
know
think counseling may be beneficial, or being part of other support groups with pediatric MS patients, because then you also have like a sounding board. You have other people, they know what you're going through. But I also think counseling can be very beneficial, speaking about how she's feeling, speaking about what she's thinking and how it's affecting her. That can be really helpful.
Okay. And is it, so you said that it's not hereditary.
No, I said there may be a component, a genetic component, but it's not clear exactly what it is.
Okay, and would the parents need to be tested then? Could they possibly have an outbreak or something? I don't know.
So people don't typically, unless they have symptoms, get imaging. Like a doctor won't typically order an MRI of the brain or do any of this without actually having symptoms of MS. So it's not something usually you would just test the parents without actually having neurological symptoms.
So she wouldn't need to test her siblings or anything like that just because she was diagnosed?
That's
like,
not
you know
common
how you have a
practice.
heart condition and then they test everybody in the family?
Yeah, that's not common practice, no.
Okay. Do you guys have any more questions? We're talking about multiple sclerosis on tonight. And pronounce your name for us again.
My name is Dr. Puja Aggarwal.
Okay. And can you tell everybody, if people wanted more information, how do they find you? Your mindfulness group and things like that. Can you tell them how to find you? And is it okay for people to reach out to you?
Yeah, so they can go to my website. It's www.zenfulbrain.com. That's ZENFULBRAIN.com. But that, again, that's really just more of my coaching practice. It's not really like my actual practice of neurology.
Oh,
These are
that's
two
fine.
separate things.
The coaching, are you accepting new?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So zenfulbrain.com.
Brain.com. Yeah.
I'm gonna add that to the comments so we can get it up there. Was there anything else you wanted to share with us about MS that maybe I forgot to ask?
Nothing additional. The only thing like I wanted to mention, like I said earlier, is people lead a good quality lives with MS. They can still be on medication, and some people never have lesions again or develop new relapses. I really recommend following up, keeping those appointments, making sure you're attending them with your neurologist, and making sure you're taking care of yourself. It's really important.
Okay. So it doesn't have to be something that's very bad for the rest of our life. It could be something that we can just get through.
Yeah, again, it depends upon the person. Not everybody is like that, but I do want to mention that is a possibility.
Everybody is different. We're going to remain optimistic. So Sheena said, thank you. You've been very informative.
Thank you.
Can somebody drop that link on there? It's zenfulbrain.com. I can't do it because I'm not at home with my computer.
You said, are UTIs common? They can be, depending on if you have had lesions that affect that certain part of the brain that affects your bladder function. So it really depends on the person.
I didn't even know that. You learn something new every day. So your wait, your bladder function is affected by your brain?
Yes, it can be.
Oh wow. And so UTIs could be common.
hmm If you have something called neurogenic bladder, where the bladder doesn't function normally because of uh, these lesions on the brain or something on the spinal cord, it just depends, then you can get UTIs where you're not emptying your bladder as much or as well as you should be, so you have routine urine, it can cause infections.
And so what is that still a separate treatment, or
So
would it
people
be a
may give
different?
medication for the neurogenic bladder. There's things like oxybutynin and things like that that people may prescribe neurologists, and sometimes either your urologist may see them and treat that.
So the UTIs, the neurologist can treat that.
They can, but it's not something they typically do. It's typically like a primary care doctor, internal medicine, or family practice. It really depends upon the neurologist and how comfortable they are.
Okay. Great, great. Okay, she already said that. Do you guys have any more questions before we get out of here? I feel like we just we just been bombarding you with questions, but
No, that's fine.
thank you so much. And was there anything else you wanted to share before we got out of here tonight? Because
No, I think
we'll have more questions. We'll have more
no, I
questions.
think I've pretty much said the most of it about MS. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time tonight. You guys make
Thank
sure
you.
that you go follow her, zenfulbrain.com. Ask somebody to put it up, but if you don't, I'll share this live and put the link to your website. And you are accepting new clients for your mindfulness group.
Yes.
Okay. And what does that look like? Let me ask that before you get out of here. If you get new clients, because we are not where you are. We're in different
Yeah,
states.
so I do them on Zoom. So I help, it's on the internet. It's obviously not in person with people who are in other states, but we go through, have one-on-one sessions typically, and then go through the practice of, journaling, gratitude, things like that, and that mindfulness. It's something that takes time, and that's something that really helps to de-stress, and it can really help people. And so there's certain tools that I give, and those can really help with mindfulness.
Okay. And again, she said that she should start journaling, staying active. Vitamin D is good. Did I leave out anything else that we
So
can start
gratitude,
right now?
practicing gratitude, and then meditation, breath work.
Meditation. That once I heard stress, I had told her we got to start teaching her how to meditate.
Yeah, that can be very beneficial.
Oh, thank you, Sharonda. Sharonda put it up there on the screen. Well,
Thank you.
thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for this information. This has really helped us and got us pointed in the right direction.
Thank you so much.
Okay, well, you enjoy the rest of your Sunday
You too.
night.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye. I hope I did that right. That was so dope. Do you guys feel like you learned something tonight? You're welcome. You're welcome. Did you have any more questions? We have her. I want to pin her website up there for the remainder of the show. We just have a few more minutes here, but tonight we're talking about multiple sclerosis. We got a lot of answers. She actually answered every question that we had, so that was awesome. Um, and before I end the show every night, I make sure that we say the fighter's pledge. The fighter's pledge is I have a voice in this world and I deserve to be heard. I have an obligation to fight for all those around me, but more importantly, I have an obligation to fight for myself. And tonight, this show was very personal for me because my little niece, she's 17 and she got diagnosed. So it's personal. So this is a fight that we're fighting for her. She's a baby and she's very strong, but at 17, even though you have a level of understanding, you look towards your elders and the people that love you the most for support. And so I'm so glad that she was able to watch this show because this is if it affects her, it affects all of us. And now I'm on a mission to figure out everything that I can about MS. And I promise you, we are going to get through this together. So, as always, thank you guys so much for giving me your Sunday nights. I really appreciate all the support and the love that you guys have been giving me on the Silent Fight. My platform is absolutely growing in the way that I imagined that it would be, the way that I knew that it would be. You guys are so amazing for showing up. I don't know how much to show you guys, how much I just truly love and appreciate you guys. But as always, you guys will see me here every Sunday night, 9 p.m. Central. I know the day and the time, but I do not know the place. I'm coming in live tonight from Philadelphia. I went to an amazing, liberating weekend conference, and it was all about mindfulness and freedom and healing. And so this was just so amazing, and it made me feel so good to get her on here to give this information. So I'm going to get out of here because I'm trying to be mindful of my time. I love you guys. I'll